welcome to today's video where we will be looking at 2025 Club World Cup tickets. You might have noticed that this is from an old video, but I did not have my headset on, so the audio was messed up. And so here we are today to look at it now as I fiddle around with colors. So last video, I mean, you can find the original video where I was going through inputting all of the values because Ticketmaster, there's not a clean way that I found just from looking up a way to see I think the same way you can't set up price alerts for Ticketmaster. Thanks Live Nation. I don't believe there's a way to really scrape ticket prices automatically. So having to go through manually is kind of the way to go through it. Which again, if you're Live Nation or Ticketmaster, that's rational, right? On the side here, we had a quick diatribe about you know tickets and then just price discrimination in general, right? Um, I've lost my moment of inspiration from the first video, but conceptually, right? Well, you have consumer surplus and you have producer surplus, which are two different things. You know, in economics, right? You have your chart, and you can have marginal cost, and you have consumer surplus and producer surplus on different sides, effectively different triangles, depending on where that line intersects. And so pretty much they're not zero, they are zero sum, in that you can maximize consumer surplus at the expense of all the producer surplus, and you can maximize producer surplus at the expense of all consumer surplus. But in equilibrium, there's probably going to be some amount for both. Of course, can things be at equilibrium is an open question. That certainly macro macro econ 102 doesn't really have a great answer for. You know, Marx probably does have it better. Um, yeah, certainly because actually, if as a quick diatribe, certainly, if I think if you read Marx or some of his actual writing, I don't know, you probably would come away thinking the guy was probably certainly diagnosing things or certainly recognizing things that don't have come out to have played out. Certainly more just from him as a writer. I think man is more right than wrong. So that's just kind of right. There's consumer surplus, which is you paying less for a ticket, and there's the producer surplus, which is Ticketmaster being able to charge more than marginal cost, allowing them to earn an excess profit than what they otherwise would, right? Because in Platonic capitalism, there should be zero profit because the market. Because if there's a dollar excess above marginal cost, right? So marginal cost is the cost to sell a unit to one more customer, right? So if you are selling tractors, the marginal cost for selling one more tractor is probably pretty high. Whereas if you're selling a video game on Epic Games or Steam or whatever, or EA Play, rest in peace, or Origin. I guess Origin is EA Play, or whomever else, right? Your marginal cost is probably pretty low, right? Uh, and so Ticketmaster certainly falls into the second category, where your marginal cost is pretty minor, or at the very least, what I have all the reason to suspect is the case. Of course, you don't have perfect transparency. I'm not going to look up Live Nation's IR website or financial statements to confirm that statement, but I think roughly speaking, because absolutely right, being public, right? There's a lot of downsides to being public, and benefits, of course, right? Being public, there's a lot of costs associated. I think 30 million is the average cost. Like this being public, just like the fixed cost of being a public company, I think's above 10 million, which you can imagine if you're a penny stock or something, it's or a small business, right? That's a pretty reasonable burden, right? Like your net present value is automatically taking a negative 10 million to your cash flows on a perpetual basis. Probably going to go up because lawyers and disclosures aren't going to go down, right? Because everything's securities fraud, and lawyers have economic incentives. But that's where we are. So that's that diatribe on consumer producer surplus. Do some little econ 102, because that's not just supply demand. So we've evolved a bit, and then just in general, right? There's price discrimination, right? So I just picked the cheapest ticket out of all of these events from the 21st, which is after the 19th when the tickets went live, and so ticket prices have generically increased. For example, Salzburg versus Al Hilal. It was $70 when I checked it that night. I didn't pull the trigger, and now they have appreciated in value, right? Because clearly, according to the powers that be at Ticketmaster and their manual dynamic pricing, which is a very amusing statement, have decided that there's more demand than supply for the 20,000 stadiums that is Audi Field in the capital of the United States. We'll come back to this. But in general, right, price discrimination can help you as a consumer and the producer. I would tend to argue it helps producers more, although it depends on what type of consumer you are. I don't have the answer off the top of my head. Let's work through it. But conceptually, whereas before you would have a flat fare, which would be higher than what you could do if you break it apart, every component of your service you're buying into separate parts. And so I think plane tickets are probably the most. And honestly, plane tickets, I think that there's a couple platonically good examples of how to explain market structure, how to explain markets, or how to explain pricing. I think planes are a very good way, or airfare tickets are a very good way to explain price discrimination to somebody. I think the sports betting industry is a very good way to explain market share and like loss leading investments. And I contrast that with, say, rideshare or food delivery, because I think rideshare and food delivery are very confusing business lines once you get into it. You can have the very superficial. It's just look at net income. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like actually thinking about like the marginal cost. We're actually thinking about unit economics and unit-based pricing. I think for those guys, it's much more confusing, right? Because a plane ticket's a plane ticket. Sports betting, just market share, but you're not doing all these weird ad backs, and increasing advertising spend isn't changing something on the other side of the business. Whereas for food delivery or rideshare, if you're increasing your generosity to drivers, you are not only supporting the rideshare but also the food delivery, because at the end of the day, it is one single network of fulfillment and logistics that you're building out. And so that's a very simplistic example, but in effect, the food and ride sharing companies, like the line segments that they report are effectively very incestuous. And so management can be clever about where they allocate costs, whereas for plane tickets and the sports betting industry or casino industry, I think it's a bit more straightforward. And on the point of being able to choose where you allocate costs, right? Another downside or pro to being public is that you have to give disclosures. You have to disclose your financials to investors. So you have a trade-off of being as transparent as possible, to incentivize like-minded investors who appreciate transparency. Maybe they're willing to assign you a lower cost of capital thanks to your transparency, so they know how the business is doing, so they can in real time, quote unquote, make adjustments on their capital allocations. And so if they have confidence in your ability to be transparent with them, maybe they'll be more willing to be a shareholder, to be long term. At the same time, though, your competitors can also look up your 10K, your 10Q, read your earnings call transcript, listen to your earnings call transcript, send your IR guy an email through some random Gmail account, right? And so you're giving away information. And so maybe, if you're inflecting in one area, maybe they see that and they increase investment to try to counter your inflection point, and vice versa. So it's all all is fair in public markets, right? Thanks to Reg FD. And so for Ticketmaster and Live Nation, again, Ticketmaster, Live Nation, I think certainly the leading player in the space. Like Vivid Seat is struggling. If you only look at the stock price, you know, SeatGeek, StubHub fulfill different parts. And honestly, some of those, again, I've never refreshed my memory. Again, Ticketmaster being the big bad wolf in the space, certainly given the various lawsuits, antitrust lawsuits against it, you know, again, at the very least, it has market power through Ticketmaster, and whether that market power is bad or if it's deserving of an antitrust suit, I don't. I think that's a fair question. Again, being honest, like my tone on this conversation is probably gonna be critical, again, because I'm thinking about consumer surplus for a sporting event, for something that I'd be interested in. However, Ticketmaster's pricing decisions for say concerts that I'm not interested in, I'm much more objective about. I'm much more willing to concede producer surplus to Ticketmaster. And so in general, I will say to the very neoliberal line is that Ticketmaster charges what the market allows. If the market would not allow it, then they would not be able to sell, and so the market would equilibrate. And being the person that I am, I will accept the neoliberal line because that is a conventional wisdom, which presumably has a reason to be correct. And I think that's the line that most financial and business professionals would say. Maybe not Lena Khan, but I'm not going to pronounce scale on that because this video is about the Club World Cup tickets. And so let's just go down the list. And so in general, all right, again, you can pause the video. If I was a better person, I would make this sheet public and share the link. I may forget to do that. But in general, so I had to manually go through and just I put in the cheapest ticket, and then being the Excel savant that I am, I can then do some wonderful average ifs to get through. Let's toss in some more colors while we're at it. Again, color scaling when it's already sorted from biggest to largest to smallest is kind of redundant, which is why I didn't do it the first time. But since we're here, why not show off the alt shortcuts? So as we can see, right, Miami having the most expensive isn't surprising given Inter Miami. Does Inter Miami only play in Miami? That would make sense. No, Inter Miami plays in Atlanta. Okay, another diatribe. So these tickets are through Ticketmaster. The 2026 World Cup should be through FIFA directly, which I think should help with ticket prices. I think what happened for the 2025 World Cup, given its slapdash nature of it, and the need to get it set up and ready to go, is that FIFA had to give up leverage to the stadiums, and so then the Yank stadium owners or operators leveraged FIFA's time crunch to get concessions economically, including on ticket pricing. So I want to diatribe about how FIFA gets a bad rap, and so I do place the blame not on FIFA but on uh, Yank stadium operators. Right. So is it still scapegoating? Yes, but I think it's a more creative scapegoat. I do think it's factual because conceptually, right? FIFA in general, FIFA solves a massive coordination issue. Same way the United Nations loosely solves a gigantic coordination issue. And so it solves the coordination issue. It allows for collective bargaining. I think that's rational. Naturally, there's going to be some fluff, but the collective bargaining structurally works with there being a central guiding body that coordinates. I think FIFA fills that role properly and well. But that's a video for another day. It's only my conviction. This is in general, FIFA gets a bad rap. That is my one of my top five quote unquote contrarian opinions. But so in general, right, we see Miami's expensive, Seattle, DC somehow is expensive, Cincinnati, Charlotte, Atlanta, Orlando, Philly, LA, Nashville. Yeah, so kudos to Nashville. Good for Nashville. Although I think logistically, although of course implicit in this is that if you consider logistic expenses, it probably balances out somewhat. But yeah, like LA, Los Angeles being this cheap and having some good games in LA, right? Like Atleti, Botafogo, right? Again, like LA, Monterrey, right? Big Mexican club, 40, the cheapest, effectively the cheapest ticket gradient, right? PSG, Paris Saint Germain versus Botafogo, right? Monterrey versus Internacional. Like these are some good games. I'm not sure for work I'll be there's anything in LA, but I think LA during the you know nice summer breeze, watching $50 Inter or Monterrey. Like it's LA. Like I'm presumably there's a decent certainly Hispanic or certainly Mexican presence. So I'm a bit surprised that I don't know, maybe everybody's a Club America supporter or Tijuana, but that's it. So again, this is much less precise. This like home game, like this is home and this is away, so it's imprecise, but it's averaging it out. So I didn't do a weighted average because that'd be a bit weird. So it's again directionally correct. And we see Inter Miami pretty expensive. Al Ali, because Al Ali's an awkward group with some big name clubs. Bayern, Madrid, Seattle Sounders. This is a bit funny. It's like who's out of place among the most expensive teams? I would say certainly Seattle. I think Palmeiras, big Brazilian club, right? Getting edged out by Botafogo for the Serie A championship this year. Al Hilal, big names there. Honestly, Al Hilal, conceptually, dark horse. I think in my original video, I talked about the betting odds on the winner. And so we talked about time value of money, of making a bet that won't pay out for 180 days. But also then like just sports betting odds implicitly. Right here, so here's right. You can use there's 32 teams, so each team implicitly has a 3.13% chance of winning. Just the base odds, right? Mathematically, if you flipped a 32 sided die, right, each team has a 132 chance of winning. If you use decimal odds, you can find out what that implied base rate of success is, right? 1 divided by 32 gets you 3.13. So if you're looking at your betting odds, um, and let me do that. Club World Cup features. Let me switch my screen. Here we go. Need to change. Okay, so this is decimal rate. Like, what am I supposed to do with these decimal odds? Like, I see plus 450. I have no idea what that converts. Like, what is my implied probability? I switch to decimal, and suddenly 10 1 divided by 10 equals 10%. There's a 10% chance that Chelsea wins the Club World Cup. Can I find can I find another easy number? Um, let's say Benfica, right? 1 divided by 32. I have roughly 32%. Excuse me, like 3%, right? Whereas, of course, you can mentally convert from American to decimal odds, right? You can do like the plus one, right? 1 plus 125, decimal is 2.25, right? So there's a plus 100 minus 100 dynamic. And also, right, American, like it's talking about how much money you can make. You bet 100 to make 390, whereas decimal, it's implicitly making you think about odds. In the same way, fractional to a lesser degree. I don't use fractional in part because of my elementary math deficiencies. So again, I think American odds are fundamentally, to use a word that can't be said, pretty unintelligent. And decimal, I think, is much more clear, much more lucid. I think the easiest way, right, it focuses you on the right thing. You're thinking about money that you can make, whereas your implied odd, what's the probability of the event you're taking on? Now, if all you're doing are parlays are plus 300,000, of course, like the implied odds are kind of meaningless, right? Because 1 divided by 30,000, that's a hilariously small number. But that should also tell you then that you're doing a parlay that has that implied odd. Then what are you doing placing that bet? You should very much expect that bet to not work out, given that it's all presumably independent or dependent events, depending on if it's on a type of event. And so if we know from that quick quant work that 32 is the numerical odd for what teams are favored, right? Because if a team is at 4.9, that means the market's pricing in about 20% odds that Manchester City wins the Club World Cup. 20% versus your base odd of 3%, right? And 32 is the delineation. So Botafogo, Juve, Borussia, Atleti, PSG, Inter, Chelsea, Bayern, Real Madrid, Real, City were all favored. Porto, Benfica, Flamengo, Palmeiras, Boca, River, Fluminense, Inter, Miami, Salzburg, Sounders, Pachuca, Alain, Monterrey, Leon, Urawa, Wydad, Mamelodi, Sundowns, Esperance, Auckland are all unfavored to extremely large degrees. But it's interesting, right? If I was, I'm not going to do in this video, but if I was to chart the skew, it'd be a very left tail distribution, given just how long the tail is. So personally, I mean, so it's interesting, right? Like, so the only non-European team, non-UEFA club to be favored is Botafogo. The only non-UEFA clubs to be less favored are Porto, Benfica. Honestly, honestly, I think you have some decent shots that are like Inter Miami being 39, laughable, extremely laughable. It's a shame like you can't short Crypto.com. They recently rolled out sports prediction markets where you can take yes, which is the same as doing what this is on a sports book. But the interesting part about the Crypto.com sports prediction is that you can take a no contract, and doing the no of a side you can't do on sportsbook. Of course, you can take a no by just omitting the bet in the first place, but that's not the same, really. Okay, I don't think the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl. Sure, I don't place that bet, but I can't benefit from that prediction. I don't think City are going to win the Club World Cup in the summer after a long main season. But there's no way for me, right? None of these guys, none of these operators will give me a no, and so that's what I think. There's a gap in the sportsbook offering, and there's room for prediction markets to come in and take it. It's a shame that you know Kalshi, which is legal in the U.S., can't, and it's a shame that Polymarket is not allowed to operate in the U.S. Despite my efforts to look for a VPN and and use stable coins to do it. That's a quick eye try. Maybe I will make that chart and do. That might be a fun thing to do, just in general. Do before the seasons of different leagues. That'd be a fun project or fun stream. But back to the tickets. I'm sure I could do ticket price correlation or relationship to the implied odds of who's gonna win. And I'm not sure how it's gonna be a bit wonky. I'd have to be a bit more clean with how like the numbers work out. But if you look at the cheapest games, right? Like Uruguay, Monterrey, like any of those guys are favored. There's an even more cheap game. Uh, like Ulsan Hyundai versus Mamelodi Sundowns. Cheapest ticket in the yeah, cheapest ticket. Right. There's no there's no natural constituency for a Korean club and a South African club in Orlando. There is no natural constituency. And if you look at the amount of seats that are available, that proves it out. There is no natural constituency. I think there's a natural constituency for pretty much every other matchup, right? I don't for at least one of the sides, but I do not think there's a natural constituency for Ulsan or Mamelodi. The same way for Wydad, Casablanca, and Al Ain, I don't really think there's a natural constituency. Al Hilal, Pachuca, I don't know. I think once people realize that Al Hilal is probably going to be the best way to watch Neymar live, right? Just given how, ticket prices for Brazil will be at the World Cup in 2026 or at whatever CONMEBOL or friendlies are going to be very silly compared to these prices. So I think once people wake up to that or take that time arbitrage bet that Neymar is going to be healthy, I think Al Hilal and Nashville like that is a good shout. I think best shot. Again, I personally I'm in the DMV area, so I was hoping, but I don't know. I mean that's fairly pricey. From on day one it was 70. Now it appreciated to there. Yeah, so these ticket prices again. Um, these are 40 games. Pause to find the one you wish. Going through. And here's probably the other good stuff, right? So pause the video, right? By stadium, right? And using stadium capacity. So there's so again like LA. I don't know if I don't know if the Rose Bowl is a horrible stadium. I suppose it's not your new American stadium of being super overly manufactured and having that pandering to luxury suites. There's probably a lesson similar to airplane economics, right? Like business is an overwhelmingly small proportion of the seats, yet contributes an overwhelming proportion of the marginal net income. So I'm not sure if American stadiums have taken that principle and uh, taken it too far. Yeah, I think the Rose Bowl there's only like the luxury suites they don't extend around the stadium. It's only on one side. So again, I think LA like those are some good games in LA. If there's a time sake, I'm not going to go through. But if you just go through FIFA, look up the club schedule, and just look at the games LA has, they've got some good games. PSG versus Atleti. Let's go through it. Monterrey Inter, good game. PSG Botafogo, good game. And you notice right, highlighted in green. If it's green on the color scale, I highlight in green. Just because it's like the lowest bands of ticket prices. River, Monterrey. I don't know. I think like this should be this should be a massive game among the Latin American community, right? You got your Argentinian club versus your Mexican club. Given all of the beef and uh, whatever remarks and animosity that exists between Argentinians and Mexicans online, I think that should be a big matchup. And yet, it's the second cheapest ticket band. This is fascinating. Atleti, Botafogo, right? Orwa, Monterrey. And so LA has some good games, which is really nice. Of course, the Rose Bowl is incredibly far from LAX in that agglomeration of the LA metro area. But everyone's again, and Nashville I think has some good games. And then by clubs, so yes, I think Seattle's clearly the odd man out among this contingent. Auckland as well, given some of their matchups. As a big picture, I think compared to an NFL game, these are reasonable, or compared to your generic NBA game. But implicitly, right, to bring it full circle, if Ticketmaster is price discriminating by using dynamic pricing to equilibrate supply and demand, loosely speaking, then the prices of the various teams implies the demand to watch those teams, which is a very obvious statement. But if we dissect that, as we have in this Excel, then we can see what clubs have the most demand, loosely speaking, and which clubs have the least demand. And so we can see that, and I'm sure you can make this a metaphor for whatever you want. We see that a Korean club, South African club, Mexican club, Tunisian club, Moroccan club, Brazilian club, German club, Mexican club, and Japanese club are the least in the least demand, whereas an American club, Egyptian club, German club, Spanish club, American club, Brazilian, Saudi, French, New Zealand are in the most demand. And so I suppose, now that I've said it out loud, using the data, it's probably a bit tougher to make whatever statements you were going to make based off this data. Given the fact that Auckland City and Al Ahly and Dortmund are in the bottom tier. So that is the 2025 Club World Cup tickets. At some point, I will go back and update it. However, I don't think the prices have moved too much since I recorded from the spot checks I've done for the DC matches. And then I'm not, again, implicitly the same way airplane tickets tend to are, there's like the 3 month rule for airplane tickets internationally. Presumably, there's an equivalent for ticket prices, but it's unclear to me which is or what that is. So it's if anyone knows, that'd be wonderful. However, presumably right, given the powers, the genius master of negotiations at Ticketmaster, presumably changed it up. I certainly don't want to have that be public knowledge. But nevertheless, these are the Club World Cup tickets. We talked about consumer producer surplus, price discrimination. Talked about the absurdity of Seattle Sounders being this expensive. So thank you for watching. Again, right, pause throughout the video. Thanks for watching.